university, the learning doesn't stop. When you're in work, the learning doesn't stop in any capacity. You need to keep learning. Need to keep sharpening yourself, whether it's through communities of practice or whatever resources, training, formal training, things like LinkedIn e-learning, for example. There is a wealth of resources available through that medium that you can take advantage of. And reading research materials, journals, knowing what the trend is in your area of interest or in your field is very important, because things are changing every day. So the tools and the practices that that you would know once you've graduated from university are not going to be, may not even be the tools and the resources in the same exact way that you would need to use when you're in when you're in the place of work. So it's important that you're consistently sharpening and you are up to date with what is the latest technology. And thank God for for the digital age that we're in. A lot of information like this are at our fingertips. Yeah. So that is basically like the my nutshell in terms of ways that you can differentiate yourself. And then if we move into your interview. So now you've applied for a job, you sent in your CV and your cover letter, perhaps you filled in your application form, and you have caught the attention of the interviewer or the recruiter or the job owner or hiring manager. So what do you do? So I can't emphasize this enough. Prepare. I put practice there twice just for emphasis, you know. So prepare. You've done a fantastic job in the first place to catch their attention. So you have one foot in. So how do you put the second foot in and make a good impression, right? So prepare, research the organization that you are planning to work for, know what its mission, its vision, its values are, know how their business is actually performing, know their competitors, because that what you find and how you prepare and the information that you gather at the stage of your preparation might be what you use to strike conversation when you go for the interview, because you don't know what they're going to ask you. You don't know who is going to engage you, and you don't know what opportunities you might have to ask questions that already begin to show that, oh yes, this person is quite forward thinking, you're proactive, you've done your homework. So basically do your homework. Before you go for an interview, practice in front of a mirror. Yeah, I've had times when I've had to interview people and people just freeze. It's almost like exam, right? So we're preparing for exam. We read so hard, we really read hard for our exam. We cover everything. We come to the exam. There have been instances where people just have like a freeze. People don't know what to write, but they have been reading. I can't explain that, in scientific terms, what that means. But I've also been in interviews where it appears, I would expect that people would have prepared, but you ask them a question and they just draw blank. I don't know what it is. So it's nerves, whatever it is, getting the best of the person. It is quite unfortunate because, I mean, as a recruiter, your role is to make sure that the person is calm and you're trying to help them bring out the best of what you believe they know in the interview. So basically, the interview is an opportunity for them to validate what you believe they know. So yes, you will get very nervous. It's normal, but know that the interviewer is actually looking for reasons to hire you, not reasons not to hire you. So you need to be intentional about, and you need to be able to convey the why and convince them that you are the right candidate. So practice in front of the mirror, right? See that you're comfortable, your body language, work on all that. Fix what you don't like. You can, I mean, these days we all have smartphones, so record your response to a question. Ask yourself a question, record your answer, play it back to yourself. Ask yourself if you like the tone, your pace, if you like the response you gave. Try it again. So what that does for you, it gives you confidence that you have done all the things you could possibly be doing. It makes a difference, right? When you have made that sort of effort and you then go for your interview. So for me, for example, in the role that I'm in right now, I mean, I know that I practice. I remember how much I practiced with this. In fact, my boss at the time, who also happened to be my coach, um, was very kind to actually, we simulated an interview, right? So he asked me questions, and it was almost like I was in a real interview because I remember feeling nerves at that time. But what that did for me was when I had the opportunity for my interview proper, I really felt like I had prepared, and I went in a lot calmer than I would have been if I hadn't prepared as much. So I can't emphasize that enough. It's something that you should really invest time to do. So remember that first impression count. You might not have an opportunity to make another, you won't have another opportunity to make another first impression. So make it current. What are you going to wear to your interview? Be comfortable. Yeah. If you can, go a day before or go before the time. There's no chance that you will get lost or you're not going to spend time looking for a place. So knowing exactly where you're going makes a difference. Yeah. And of course, arrive in good time. Don't just be late for your interview. Yeah. Be sure you have all the information that you need. They might want specific documents from you on the day, but I think in my experience, most people, and even as a recruiter, we're not necessarily asking for documentation on the day because in this digital age, a lot of the information you have already sent e-versions of those copies. So we're not asking you to bring anything on the day, but you never know. Just know, be clear around what is being asked of you and make sure that you have everything on the day, whether it's e-versions or whether it's hard copies, so that that doesn't become an issue on the day. So as you prepare for your interview, even think about what is your motivation for applying for this role. Why do you want to work here in the first place? And this is beyond the money, right? So yes, of course, we all go into employment because we want to make a living, but it's good that you are clear around why you want to work here. Is it because of the career path? Is there somebody that you know who has worked there, who you look up to, and who has been able to make a positive impact? So those are the sort of things that will be good for you to know what your motivation is. And of course, following after that is, so right, you want to work here for these reasons. Now, what are you even bringing to the table? What skills do you offer? What problem, are you a problem solver? Are you a resourceful person? Are you the sort of person who will say, okay, my role is to be, this is my role, and an opportunity comes for you to do something, or you see something that could be fixed, or you see a problem that you can help with, and you say, no, this is not my space. I'm not going to do anything about it. You turn a blind eye. So how much accountability and how much connection could you possibly have? How resourceful are you going to be as an individual? Are you going to be in that? Are you going to be a go-to person that people can rely on in whatever capacity, whether as an encourager, whether it's as a team player, whether it's as a support, as a support person, for colleagues. So those are the sort of things that will be good for you to be able to think about in terms of what you're bringing to the role beyond your functional skills and experience. As you wrap up your interview, um, of course, you thank the interviewer for their time and the opportunity. I think politeness is something that interviewers really value. So when you pay attention and you notice, you say thank you for at the end of an interview. It's not something that we take for granted, and it might seem like a small thing, but it's not a small thing. So you thank for their time and the opportunity. I think it's important as well that you are clear on what the next steps are so that you're also not going away from the interview not knowing and thinking, oh, when would I hear? When would I not hear? Right? So it's good to ask what the next steps should be, when you should expect to hear back, and ask if they mind a follow up. I think it just shows that you are interested, and you're not prepared to leave anything to chance. Yeah. Then, of course, ask if you can get feedback on your performance regardless of the interview outcome. That is a good way to indicate that you have a learner mindset, you want to grow and you want to develop. And I think that any good organization should be able to give you this sort of feedback, especially if you were able to get to an interview stage. Yes, I know that it might take a lot of that time, but if they have interviewed you, then regardless of the interview outcome, they should be prepared to give you a summary of areas of strength that came through during the interview or areas of development. Clearly, if you are successful, it means of course that you had strengths that they really want to see, and it does not mean you didn't have developmental opportunities, but it means that those areas for development will be part and parcel of your development program that they will put in place for you. But I don't think that you should lose an opportunity to ask for some sort of feedback, so that it helps you also to sharpen areas that need to be sharpened when you have a next opportunity. So I think that is essentially all that I had prepared in terms of what I wanted to convey in the first instance, and we can spend the rest of the time on questions. I know that Bab said that there were already prepared questions, and maybe depending on how the time goes as well, we might be able to take some on the call here today, and then hopefully we can sort of just deepen the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true, and thank you very much for that very insightful and very expository session. I trust that everyone did get something useful out of that. But before we move on, we have received your questions, the ones you prepared ahead. But before we would go into those ones in a minute. But I want you to, if you do have any other question, or maybe you didn't get the opportunity to send yours across to Dr. Jide before now, please feel free to also type it into the chat box, and then we'll pass them on. We'll get the speaker to answer them as we go on. Okay. All right. So I'll kick off with the first set of questions. If so, the first one. So we the questions I got. Thanks for sending them across. We I try to break them down into different categories. So we'll start with the easy ones, which is nomenclature. So the first question is, what's the difference? So we hear people say things like
Thanks, babe.
resume and CV, and then we hear people say things like, so first of all, I think the first one is, what's the difference between a CV and a resume, or do they mean the same thing?
Mm,
And then we also hear words like chronological CV or functional CV or combination CV.
mhm.
Um, Maybe you could share a bit around what those words really mean, so that people also don't are careful in the way they use them.
Yeah. So resume and CV are the same. What I find is that in America, they tend to use the word resume much more. I guess the rest of us in the UK and in Nigeria, we technically would essentially refer to CV. So they're essentially the same thing. Then the chronological, I think the next question was chronological and functional CV,
Functional.
right?
Yep. Yes.
Yes. So a chronological CV is like it's a standard, the traditional CV that we have come to know. So it's basically you highlighting your achievements, your from a career perspective or from an educational perspective in a chronological order. So with the most relevant or with the latest first and going in that order. Some people would put um the earliest information first, but you know, practice has been you put what was most relevant or what you have in view that is ongoing first, followed by the rest. The functionals and that is what most people would use. A functional CV, the functional CV is the one that highlights that summarizes your experience and your skills, right? So not necessarily within that you may have obtained from various capacities. Yeah. So you're talking about maybe you're a team player, you are you're knowledgeable in a certain area. So you're summarizing the experiences that you have gathered from a range of from a range of exposures. And a lot of people use the functional CVs when they have had, so like if you've had gaps in your experience, Yeah. So then there's going to be a huge gap in your chronology. Then that the functional part really helps you to sort of highlight how that time that you can't so those that period where you can't really date and ascribe to a certain place or experience. It helps you to highlight the experiences and the expertise that you have gained in that area. So it's when you have had a lot of volunteering and other sort of experience, and then you use the functional sort of CV to highlight and capture those in relevance to the role that you are now applying with that your CV. But what we find a lot of times is that many times people can choose to do a combination CV. Yeah, so you can have both a functional where you're highlighting your key competencies or expertise, and then the chronological part also then exists, and it can be in different ways. So you can mix it, or you can have a combination CV where you have your functional part first, followed by your chronological part. So it can be a mix. For
Yeah.
us as students who are preparing, I would expect that you probably haven't had that much experience yet. So it will be good for you to use a combination, right? So that is following in a chronological way, you're following your education, but then that functional section will really help to highlight what skills you have gained, what you're bringing to a role, you know, having had maybe an internship opportunity, what you have been volunteering in, because your career section will be expectedly short.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And I think that brings us to the second set of questions, which is around people really want to know, what do you put in your CV? So I see
Mm,
we got a bit of questions around what does a CV, what's the key aspect of a good CV, or
mm,
how should it look like? What
mm,
should I include in the CV? So do you, maybe you
mm,
want to talk around that? So I see questions around, should I include my age? Should I include my
mm,
date of birth, street address, um,
mm,
in the CV as well?
yeah. No, so I would say don't put your date of birth and your age on your CV. Um, and what you need to also consider is, if, because it should be of no consequence. If it was of consequence, then they would highlight it in the criteria for the job application. And already you can assess and you can do your screening to know whether that is the role for you or not. So if a job owner has said that, you know, there is an age limit, or there's an age bracket that they're looking for a particular role, if you don't fit into it, don't apply. Yeah, if you don't fit into it, don't apply. But indeed, put your address information on your CV. What should be in your CV is your experience or your career achievement, as well as your educational achievements, your personal interests, and yeah, anything else that you think that might be relevant. So your references should be in your CV as well, or your one reference should be in your CV. So in a summary, your CV is conveying your passion, your personal profile, your career and your educational achievements, your interests and your reference in a nutshell. Yeah. And I mean, there is a wealth of examples online. And I think that it's good to, leverage that online experience and this online resource that we all have, and see examples of good CV and tailor yours accordingly. There is nothing new under the sun. So you're not gonna, obviously your own CV is going to have your personal touch, and you should give your own CV your personal touch. But there's a lot of information out there that can guide us to create what is relevant. And the other part, that in making your in creating your CV, or enhancing your CV for those who already have, would be to make sure that you are paying attention to the adverts and what has been requested in ensuring that your CV at least scales that first step to grant you an interview. So really think about what you put in your CV, how you arrange your CV, the content of your CV, the words you choose to use for your CV should be relevant to the role that you are applying for. If you're going to apply for 5 roles, I would expect you to look at your CV 5 times and tailor it in 5 different ways. It may not mean that the CV will have a different look, totally different look for all 5, but it means that you're intentional. Yeah, but it means that you're intentional in making sure that for each of those 5 roles that you have put in for, that your keywords are tailored and that you've actually, you've invested your time in ensuring that you at least give yourself a very good chance for those different 5 roles.
Okay.
So don't just post your CV, don't just send your CV.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks. I think that also that probably has answered some questions here. So I see one specific question. Maybe you can touch on that. It says, as an individual who has done soft skill training with Jobberman, and I also have a certificate in it. How do I put those skills on my CV? Do I list them all or just pick a few? And which would you recommend to put in the CV?
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe
Yeah.
you can touch on this as well. Do you recommend I put in volunteering experience and positions held in religious, educational, and NGOs in a CV for an engineering position?
Hmm. Okay. So the first one around, sorry, remind me. So the first one was around.
So this person has done some soft skill training
Oh yes, okay. So the
and
one
has
with
a
Jobberman.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
yes,
So yeah,
7
you've
and
done, yeah. So all those courses that the interventions you've done with Jobberman, indeed, put them in there, right? But if you've done, let's say 15, 20, you might not have the space. So summarize. So summarize and think about what is relevant for the role that you are applying. Because if you've done 20 soft skills courses with Jobberman, I want to know what is relevant about those courses to the role that you are applying for. So for the ones that you think you have obtained transferable skills that will be useful for the job that you're applying, highlight them, right? So obviously you're not, if you're going to make a long list, you may not be able to capture it. So find a way that summarizes that experience and make it relevant for what you are applying. So it's not just to list it for listing sake. You might want to think about what is the connection with that those soft skill training and how are you bringing them on to your role. And it sort of ties into the way I would respond to the question that about the volunteering opportunities or volunteering roles in religious and in education. So those volunteering roles, whether it's in church or whether it's in any other religious body, is important. But it's to make meaning of it, make sense of it. So how does that come in? Is it your volunteering? Was it capacity building? Was it showing your team working ability? Did you solve a problem? Right? So, what was it that you did that was useful from that volunteering experience that should make me want to speak to you further? And that may apply to your role, in which sense is it transferable? Because there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of all these things that we do in work that we do in volunteering capacity that are helping us to obtain transferable skills. So indeed, don't undermine those. And if you're not already volunteering in these spaces where you find yourself, begin to think about how you want to volunteer for your own, besides you wanting to give back, but for your own selfish reason as well, because you
indeed.
know that that is an opportunity you can leverage. Eh?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Right. So I think with that, I'll take a few more on the CVs. I think we'll take a few more questions. So just maybe two more questions, and then we can go to the interview tips as well. Topic, feel free to jump in anytime if you do have one or two comments on it. All right. So on the
Yeah.
C, yeah. Okay.
I think I just what I Sorry, I'm not showing my face. I have a baby here with me.
Go ahead.
Let's
Um,
see your baby.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. What I want to talk about was in relation to the soft skills training. So I think it's not just only so much about the training itself, but where you have applied those soft skills. So I think what Beverly was talking about in terms of places where you have volunteered, because those are the places where you probably have used those soft skills. So whether things like communication skills or team working skills. So it's not just enough to list those skills on your CV, but to maybe in a summary to show where you have used those skills, especially if some of those specific skills are highlighted on the job description that you're applying for, the role you're applying for, as Beverly has mentioned. So if you have such things and you have those skills and you have used them in a particular place, you might just put a line, one sentence of where you have used that particular skill, especially if it's going to be helpful in making your CV to stand out.
Mm.
Right. Thanks so much. Yeah. So I'll take the next set of questions on the CV. So the first one is, how long should the CV be? I know this is where some people have specified number of pages, maybe 2 pages, 3 pages, 1 page. So what's the ideal length of the CV? And also maybe while you're on that, there are two questions here in the chat group, which says, what's the difference between, can we differentiate between the professional and the academic CV? And then, is it a good thing to put your business brand on the CV? Okay.
Mm. Okay. So, well, maybe I'll take the latter. So, business brand on the CV. So then again, think about where are you applying? So, are you an entrepreneur or are you looking to um, go into paid employment? In which case, it's not your business brand that they are. Um, it's not your business. It's not your business brand that is of interest to the interviewer or to the job owner. So it is you. But if you have a business brand, which is you're also an entrepreneur, you have enterprising skills, and you want to convey that in your CV, then it's something that you can consider putting alongside, your the skills or your achievements that you have. So that would come under your professional achievements, right? And then you can summarize what you have on the side that you are doing as well. Yeah. But if it's something that you are actively doing at the present time whilst you're going into paid employment, you should be prepared to talk a little bit more around how you're going to create the balance with your paid employment and your other interest. I think most good organizations or most organizations are not necessarily wanting you to not have anything else that you're doing, or not, they're not trying to stop you from pursuing other interests, but you want to also be clear that there is not going to be any conflicts of interest in that space. So it's something that you should be prepared to talk about. Yeah, but bear in mind that the person who is applying for the job, who is applying for the job, is you, not your business brand, unless you're applying for something as an entrepreneur, because there will be spaces maybe you are applying for a grant as an entrepreneur, and in that sense it's your brand name, it's your brand, your business brand that is applying, and then that's what you want to showcase. So just be intentional about who are they interested in, and who are you profiling. Yeah. um the other one, Bob, sorry, if you can just help me with the middle
Mhm.
question.
Yeah, so the second one is on, can you just quickly differentiate between a professional and an
Okay.
academic CV? And
Okay.
then maybe finally you
The number
touch
of
on
pages.
how
Mm.
long should the CV
Yeah.
be? Yes.
Okay, so a professional CV is basically focused on your profession, your career experiences. So if there is no requirement to reflect an academic, your academics in your CV, yeah, your academic experience in your CV, then maybe that's why you want to take it out. But essentially, your CV should cover all of that. But if there is a specific reason to focus in one area versus the other, then you tailor your CV accordingly, and you'll be, of course, responding to what has been asked of you. And then obviously the academic CV is where you're focused on your academic achievements rather than your professional experience. And it may mean that because there is no professional experience to actually bring on board. So your CV would essentially be an academic CV because this is where you have spent the significant part of your time that you're conveying in that CV. The other point will also be, so there's no perfect answer for the number of pages of your CV. The more important thing is, what are you putting in your CV? So if we have an Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, for example, I'm sure her CV cannot be one page unless she wants to make it one page and leave out a lot of the information that may not be relevant for the reason why she's having her CV, for example. Yeah. So you have to think about what is the purpose when you're doing your CV, you're submitting your CV somewhere. What is the purpose for, what are you asking for, and what are they asking for, and what is relevant? So it's always about tailoring your CV to convey relevance. Yeah. But typically, I think at your level, I would expect you to have not more than two pages of your CV, because looking through a CV takes time. Yeah. And it's not the most exciting of things, really. So, to be honest with you, so unless your CV is really captivating, then somebody wants to sit down and start reading your CV. But they're key things. So, it's a key, looking through a CV is actually supposed to be a punchy exercise. We're not trying to we are not trying to understand your CV. We are looking for what is relevant here, what is relatable, what is resonating from your CV to what we are asking for. So we're just looking for those things so that we can run with them. If we look through the first two pages and we don't see it, we're not going to go to a third page. So it doesn't matter that your CV is 5 pages, because that third page, we may not even pass the first page. So just make sure that what is relevant is what you're putting first. And yeah, and that keeps the attention. But it's very easy to move on, actually, from a first or second page if it's not already speaking to you in terms of relevance and resonance.
Yeah. Oh, thanks a lot. I think that really sums up the whole stuff about the CV. That the most thing is recruiters want you to catch their attention. So you must do that as quickly as you can and in the most professional way that you can. And definitely, if you have as a graduate, if on as just a fresh graduate, if you have a 5-page CV, I'm 100% sure that uh, a lot of it would not be catching any attention. So for you, maximum of 2 pages should be okay to say everything that you want to say, especially for the level of jobs that we would also type of jobs that would also be applying for at this level. Okay. So maybe as before we move on to the interview tips, I'll take this last one is on the cover letter. So is a cover letter always required? And what should the cover letter contain?
Yeah. So it depends. So it's not always required. Yeah, it's not always required, and it depends on the format in which you are asked to send your CV. So sometimes you're sending your CV through the portal, so through an organization's portal, and if they want you to have a cover letter, they'll ask you. Otherwise, it's mainly fields of text that you're providing, and then you have an opportunity to attach your CV. If they ask you to attach a cover letter, they will tell you as well to attach a cover letter. If you're sending your CV free format in an email, then it's good. You may not necessarily need to have an additional attachment of your cover letter, but I think that you should have a cover. Your CV should be followed by a cover note if you're sending it in an email, which I guess would be, in a manner of speaking, a cover letter, but it's an email, right? So if they want a cover letter, they would usually ask for what they're ask they would usually be clear around what they're asking for. So your most times when they're asking you for documentation, or when you're sending your application, is your credentials that they're asking at that point in time. and your application form and your CV. They may not ask you for a cover letter, but if they ask you for a cover letter, then you send it. If they don't ask and you send, they may not read it. That is the truth. So
Indeed. So I think maybe to just share some experiences that I've seen of bad practices that people do. You remember recall that there are multiple ways people ask you to. So for some job interviews, for some job positions, they would ask you to send your CV by email. Okay, one of the things that people do is to send the CV with a completely blank email. So for so for me, I think that that's almost like a no-no, because in
mm,
your, at least as a minimum, you should follow that email with a note. Dear sir,
mm-hmm,
this is to apply for this social position that was advertised. My CV is attached. Thank you.
yep,
Something as simple
mm-hmm,
as that is it all, because I think Beverly had mentioned, you are trying to catch attention. So if you send an email and there is nothing in the email, you just put your CV in the email.
mm-hmm,
It's already creates an impression about you, compared with someone who has taken the time to even put a small
mm-hmm,
note on it.
mm-hmm,
So I think those
yeah,
are some of the little tips that can help us with the perception that we create when we send out some of our CVs.
yeah. And I think if I just touch on that one, so some of you, because of course we're in a global, the world is a global village, right? So also recognize that you may be applying for that job outside of Nigeria, right? So it's good to think about what is the salutation that is appropriate for that environment. Yeah. So it's good to do a bit of research on that one if you're sending a free flow email in addition, to accompany your CV. So obviously, if the person, especially if there's an individual who you're going to be sending the CV to, know what the individual's name is, address them properly, right? So if you don't know who it is and you're asked to send it to and address it to whom it may concern, do so. If you're going to be doing sir or ma, do that as well, because don't assume that you know the gender of the person. So think about how you balance your salutation, especially if you don't know exactly who it is. Yeah. So in some places it's dear, in some places it might be hello, some places. So think about what is the context there, because it shows you, it's part of how it's part of showing that you've also prepared and you've taken time out to understand what might be appropriate in that climb.
All right. Okay, good. Right. So we'll move on now to the interview questions, interview tips. So I think the first one is, what is the best reply to? Okay. Well, let's start with this. What's the best way? So usually there's a question here that you are asked to introduce yourself. So, what is the best answer to give when you are asked to introduce yourself?
Okay, I think it's a it's a I mean, they just want to know who you are. So think
Okay.
about, what do you want to tell the person? So
Okay.
there is
Maybe
something
to put a
called your
context
elevator
to this also is that
Okay.
the person says, is it proper to explain an attribute which is not relevant
Mm,
with the job? Yeah.
mm. So this is when you go for an interview and you're asked to introduce yourself, right? So
Yeah.
keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Yeah. Think about as well the context, because so you're the one in context. If they've asked somebody before you, for example, to introduce themselves, so I don't know in what setting it might be. So the person may have even introduced, what would happen usually is the person will introduce themselves to you, right? So somebody invites you for an interview, they introduce themselves, say, hey, hi, I'm Beverly Ogbaide, and I'm let's say, the recruiter for your recruiter for today. So you to keep your own short. They're not going to penalize you for not going into details of yourself, because the interview process would give you the opportunity to do just that. So when it comes to introducing yourself, keep it short. Tell them your name, tell them where you have come from, and say what you do. Yeah, and leave it as that. There is also something called the elevator pitch as well, that is almost like a 1 minute, 2 minute introduction of yourself that you always want to have at the back of your mind. And the way I would explain it, you might already know what this is, but just for the benefit of anybody who might not know, is what is that? What would you say if you had a chance meeting with, let's say, Dangote, for example, or somebody who you really admire, and you only had 1 minute with them on an elevator because they're going to come out on their floor, right? So, what is that thing you would want to say to them? Yeah, that might make or break. So, I'll just leave us with that.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks. So then I think the next question is, so someone talked about a bit of the trick questions. How do we deal with questions around salary when you are doing an interview?
Mm,
So if for example, if they ask you what kind of salary do you need, or what's the salary range that you think you qualify for?
mm. Yeah, so I think, so be honest about it. Yeah. So ask them. So if it's a role that is completely negotiable, where you can actually ask for anything, right? So you can state what you expect. And where does that come from? So you do your benchmarking. So if you sort of research how much do they pay people with your level of experience, whether it's a fresh graduate or somebody with 1 or 2 years of experience, um, what will they pay you? So have a consideration for that. If you also Google, some people, some jobs might give you a range. Some job adverts might provide a range of what you should expect to receive as total as your remuneration package. So you can use that as a reference point. Yeah. And when you're going to respond to that sort of question, you can say, yeah, so you've looked at what is a potential or probable remuneration package for somebody in your in with your profile, and this is what it is. You think, yeah, that would be a fair compensation package. If you have your own needs as well, it's good for you to um, sort of simulate that package against what you think your own what your own financial needs are, of course being realistic, and just put those side by side, and then check whether that is balanced, and then convey that. But I think that it would be also good to find out whether, ask your recruiter, ask your interviewer what difference that makes, right, in you being the chosen candidate for your role. And their response should give you an indication of what they might want to do with your with that information. For me personally, when I was looking for a job, there was a time in my career where I was thinking about a career change, and I put my CV somewhere, and they called me not to even give me an interview, but to ask me what I was earning. So they didn't even ask me what I was expecting for them to give me, to pay me. They asked me what I was earning, and I did not answer the question. I told them I thought it was a bit premature for you to call me after you've seen my CV to ask me how much I am earning, but you're not putting anything on the table. So I didn't answer that question. And of course, needless to say that we didn't proceed with that. And I guess the good thing was I was already in employment, but I don't know whether I would have answered the question differently if I wasn't in employment. I don't know whether they were just sort of trying to test the waters. But if you go for an interview and they ask you, yeah, feel free to mention something. But it's also good to find out of what difference will it make in terms of you then putting that on the table, and say that this can be up for negotiation. So that gives them room to know that that shouldn't be a make or break. But you also want to be clear around what you accept and what you won't accept as well.
indeed. Yeah. So, so then the other question here will be on stability. So we've seen people sometimes ask, how long do you want to work for us, or questions around, if you see another opportunities, will you go? How do you recommend that we tackle those kind of questions from reviewers?
Mm. So I think you're applying for these jobs, and this is where the motivation comes in, right? So you're applying to this company where you're being interviewed for because you want to work there. You're right. So it is the organization's job once you have sufficiently shown that you are the right candidate for that job. It is their responsibility to take on initiatives that retain you in that role. So in our organization, for example, we think about attraction and retention. So it's not about just attracting the candidate, it's also about retaining them. How do you retain? Is ensuring that they are purposefully engaged in the organization, that they are treated fairly. So I think the way you should respond to that question would be to let them know that you're applying for this role because you are interested in this organization. Reinstate the reasons why you're actually applying for the role, and say that that itself is an indication that this is where you see yourself for the foreseeable future, and you hope that that you would continue to add the value, and the company would likewise recognize that, and you continue your employment relationship here for the foreseeable future. I think that that is the way to respond to that question, unless the role that you're applying for is tenured, right? So unless there's a start and end date for what you're applying, in which case, they might want to be clear that, okay, so this is a 5-year contract. You're going to be here for 5 years. You're not going to break the 5 year. They might want that sort of assurance for tenured. But if it's a permanent role, especially it's not even as if you have a track record of working in a place for 3 months and you're off to the next and sort of moving on in a way that is not explained, is where that sort of concern might come through. But if it's just a generic question to check in with you, whether you have other plans and whether you might move on soon or whatnot, if you don't have any such plans, which I expect maybe may not be the case, then I think it's just good to sort of just give that assurance that the reason why you have applied for the role is an indication that you want to continue to stay, and you would expect that both sides of the coin are working together to just to keep you in employment.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give put one more question across. So the first one is, after a job assessment, should the applicant always expect a feedback, uh, whether it's a success or regret mail, or because I think maybe we've seen companies that just don't respond. They don't tell you whether it's okay, you
Mm,
passed or you fail or something.
mm. Yeah, and as a people professional, I would like to apologize on behalf of any company that has not, bothered to respond if you have given them your time for an interview. So yes, you should expect. Hence why my comment when I was talking about wrapping up was to sort of manage expectations and also set expectations for them that you're expecting to hear back. So you should expect to hear back whether you were successful or not, and they should tell you the time frame for when you should hear back. In addition to hearing back, you should also even expect to hear if you were successful. Yes, they might even go into details around what really stood out. But because you're successful, you should expect to hear about that maybe in the first few in at the beginning stages of your career with them, because that would form your the focus areas for your areas of development, because there's nobody who goes for an interview and doesn't have areas that will be opportunities for development that the company will want to sharpen even further, right? So everybody should have a development plan in the organization that they work. But more importantly, as well, is for if you were not successful, I think you owe yourself to ask them for, okay, so do they mind just sharing with you what you could have done better in that interview? And any good organization would should oblige you that if you ask. Yeah, it may not be immediate. They might want to set up a time for to come back to you on that, but they will but they should be able to.
to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, then I'll take this next one. So this is around questions on how do I how can you project your strengths when you are when you are being asked when you are being interviewed. Maybe you can give some tips on how you can show that show your greatest strength when you are when you are being interviewed.
Mm. Yeah, so it's good to reflect on, so it's going through your CV, of course, again, and reflect on what have you what have you been doing in every capacity, right? So if you're talking about you being a team player, if that is something that is going to be useful in the role that you're applying, think about the times when you have been a team player, whether it's in school, whether it's in a volunteering capacity, whether it was during an internship or even a gap year. So think about active experiences or examples that you can use that convey the role that you played particularly. Yeah. So if you're talking about you being resourceful or you being able to adapt to your environment or you being a problem solver, think about active examples of when you have solved a problem. Bring the context, bring the role that you played specifically and what the end result was. Yeah. So the context, the role you played, and the impact you made will be ways that you can sort of articulate the strengths in the various elements or different categories that you might be talking about. So think about what you did and the impact that you made. So it's not just what you did, was what was the impact, and so what? You did it and then what happened?
Yeah.
Maybe the way you can think about how you want to frame your or sort of convey your strengths in a way that can be can be valued.
Yeah. Thanks so much on that. I think that's an interesting one for me as well because there's a methodology that I'd like to share with you all, which is the methodology is called the STAR methodology, which is it's a way for you to demonstrate to share with people some of your strengths that you've done on what you've done. So the STAR is an acronym for situation, the task, the I think it's the what
The
did you
action.
your action and then
Mhm.
the outcome, the results. Okay, so whenever someone asks you, can you tell me something about how, can you give me an example of how you have been resourceful? So one of the things you should, what the way you do it is you think about a situation where you have had the opportunity to be resourceful. So you describe to them that situation, and then you tell them what was the task that you were asked to do. So the situation can be, oh, I was in school, or I was at home playing football, or while I was serving in Maiduguri or something like that. And then the task is I was asked to teach a class of 50 students, or I was asked to lead my class for a practical session. And then you then describe what your action was and then what the results that you eventually had. So that's one way that helps you to frame your response when you get some of those kind of questions from the interview. Okay.
Yeah. And like the youth service thing you just mentioned, and I think is an opportunity that I'd like to advise or just advocate that we don't take for granted, because everybody in Nigeria, as it were, every Nigerian who has gone to university and is going to come back to work in Nigeria would have to do youth service. So at least as a minimum, we will all have 1 year experience. Whether you like that 1 year experience or not now becomes the matter. But at least as a minimum, all of us going into paid employment have that opportunity for that 1 year experience, right? So make the most out of it. And I know that a lot of us in our youth corps capacity do so much, and I don't know whether we are really leveraging that experience sufficiently. So it's in the CD group, your CD capacity, where you're actually giving back in one form or the other. So there's a lot that you can leverage from that opportunity. It's even in volunteering, in maybe like fundraising, putting money together to solve a problem that you find in the community where you go for your youth service. So those are already examples that you can be intentional about putting together in a way that shows that you added value in one way or the other. So that youth service experience, please don't throw it away. Maximize it, because it would open a lot of other opportunities for you.
All right. That's great. So then I'll take this. This is actually outside the two key topics we were looking at, but I think it's an interesting question, which may maybe also coming from an HR person, they can see some perspective on how to do this. So the question is that some companies don't make their vacancies public. So how can you get hired into such a company? Is there
Hmm.
some tips you can share on how we can break into those companies that are very secretive with their vacancies?
Yeah, so I was just sort of trying to crack my brain, and I think I don't know I don't know what informs that sort of decision, right? And I want to be careful here with what I represent or what I say here. But I know the anecdotal or the informal way that we have described those organizations. Maybe like you just hear, oh, maybe one government institution, they have how many hundred intake. You say, when did they do recruitment? We did not see it. Oh, it was maybe word of mouth. How did they do it? You know, so to be honest, I don't know how to respond to that question. Maybe those organizations, that is their resourcing model or their resourcing strategy, is not to go public. Maybe they want to use what is it called,
Referrals.
referrals. Maybe, yeah, referrals, people who are already employees in the organization to ask for their um within their own networks to bring. I mean, there are a range of reasons, and I was just talking about one example of a Nigerian content that is not such a good practice, but there are many reasons why an organization might choose that. And they might already be wanting to reduce the footprint, maybe because they can't handle hundreds and thousands of CVs, and they only have one position, for example, or a very few positions, and there is no need to go so public, right? So they already have a strategy around how do we get the best candidate for that role. But in some other climes, they would they're not publicizing it for reasons best known to them. And I don't think that's something you should bother about. If you don't know that they're applying, then you don't know that they're applying. So let's focus on the ones that we're clear. These ones are looking for people. You're clear that there will be a chance of fairness in and transparency in how the process will be conducted, and we focus on that, unless it's an intentional resourcing strategy, like I've said, where they only have one person and they just want to do the employment they want to resource um, by referral, and that can also be a valid method, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that
Sorry,
that
Babs,
that.
can I?
Go ahead, yeah, please.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, apart from what Beverly has mentioned, the other way you can look at this is to sometimes make unsolicited applications. And I know that there are some companies that'll tell you don't do unsolicited applications; they don't want it. But I think there are other ways you can go around it. Either you send an unsolicited application to a company, even if you don't know whether they are hiring or not. Probably get the email address of someone there, or get their email address of their website, and that can work. Or another way is look look on LinkedIn, check LinkedIn, look at people who work in that company. Maybe 2-3 people, send your email and your CV to them. But in that way, you need to put some good works and use some of the, some of the tips that Beverly has given here. Use it to sort of write a nice cover note, send your CV to them, and just tell them what you are looking for, what you want to do. And I mean, I've seen this work. There's a friend of mine who got a job in Shlom BJ that way. He just sent his CV, contacted people on LinkedIn, and those people now sent his CV to the HR, and he got an interview. And in fact, my first job after my master's here in London, I just checked I saw a number of people who have worked. No, I actually saw someone who has worked in that company and the kind of role I would want to do. And he had, sorry. So I saw someone who had worked in the kind of role I liked, and he had left the company. And I just sent an email to the company. They were not recruiting at that time. I just sent an email to them, sent my CV, told them what I could do for them, the kind of skills I had. And eventually, coincidentally, someone was actually planning to leave maybe about a month later. And it so happened that although they had not put out an advert, they were actually going to plan to recruit. And eventually I got the job. So sometimes those things can work. Even people, if people are not advertising, look for people who are working in those companies, send them your CV, tell them what you can do, or send unsolicited applications to those companies. Who knows what will work?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I think it's you're right in terms of the like applying, just posting your CV or applying through the company portal. They may not have an active campaign, but some organizations actually encourage you to go through their portal and submit your CV or express an interest in the areas that you can you're qualified to work. And when an active opportunity or when there's an active campaign, those details are in the pipeline somewhere, and they will then ask you to apply specifically for the role. So yeah, that is essential. That's actually something that works in addition to what Dr. has said. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe to also add to that is that actually there are some companies that actually have a rolling, so they don't advertise, especially for some roles, and I think sometimes it's entry level position. So they don't advertise them because they have a rolling. It's like a rolling vacancy. So what you should do is if you go to their careers page, you can always put in your CV straight as a graduate hire, or as a beginner, in any company. You can just put your CV on their website, and it goes into their system. I know some companies like consulting firms do such things. So you would not see advert for new joiners or entry level positions, because on their website the jobs are always there. So for those kind of companies, don't, like I think everyone has said, don't be afraid to. The best thing that could happen is for them to say no. So and then on the flip side, you can actually get something out of it. So um, if they have a website, go to the website. For entry level positions, if they have an opportunity for you to upload your CV, do so, and then hope for the best. If you can get an email of someone to contact, you can send an unsolicited application, and see what comes out from that. And also, maybe at this point, I would also like to highlight that LinkedIn is a very, very good site. It's not like Facebook, so so you will not get all the plenty of political and religious issues there. So on LinkedIn, very professional. So try and create a profile there. it also helps you to see how to structure your CV. And you would see examples of people who are probably doing something like what you like to do, that you can see how they have structured their CVs as well. And you can begin to create something that will mimic that, for that will fit your own profile. Okay. Okay. So I think thanks for all the questions. I think we try to cover as many as broadly as we can. Um, so I don't know if you have, maybe I will just take one or two final comments from you, Beverly, and then we can wrap up the session.
Okay. I think I'll just say thank you for the opportunity to engage with you. I think that it's really good what your alumni is doing, connecting back with the colleagues who are in education actively right now and preparing them for work. I attended a it's called the HRBP meet Connect last 2 weeks ago. And one of the profs that attended that session was talking about we're talking about how the things that we need to do to ensure that our graduates are more employable. Because yes, we know that employment rate is high, but if you go, there are also a lot of opportunities, or a lot of jobs that we're not filling, right? Because we're not finding the right candidates. So the comment from him was there were a few things that he said were of urgent need to be done right now, and one of them was to bridge the gap between academia and the workplace. And I was just finding when you were sort of opening the session this afternoon, and you were talking, and that sort of came through. So it is something that is really important, and I think that I would just like to leave our upcoming professionals with, think about how you're going to apply what you have learned in university in the workplace. A lot of it will be relevant, but there will be a lot of skills that you might that may not necessarily be purely academic, that you would need to bring into work. So if you have opportunities for internship and that volunteering, we cannot emphasize it enough, because it is how you will further differentiate yourself as you're wrapping up from school. So by all means, stay positive. Don't allow my quote for today was around being intentional, believing in yourself, not allowing what is going on in your environment. I know that if we're honest with ourselves, the environment in Nigeria at this present time may not be so encouraging, especially for you who is in school. But don't allow that to deter you. Don't allow that to shape the way you see yourself and the way you are sort of approaching your next phase. Remain positive. There will still be people, there will be jobs. People would need to apply to employ people. Be one of those people that believes that you will get an opportunity, because you'll be prepared to take advantage of them when they come. So I wish you all the best in the coming months, years, as you wrap up this part of your life and you move on to the next. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to see another time. So well done and all the best.
Thank you very much for giving us your time. We do appreciate this. I know it's right now it's almost 11, going to 11 p.m. here in Brunei, where she's based. So it's really a commitment on our part to join us today. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your time. I also have, I can see Dr. Salahuddin is online. We wanted to recognize you and thank you for also giving us the opportunity, the time, and joining us most especially. I think that's really we appreciate that. I don't know if you want to maybe say a few words. You can unmute and just share.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Just as you have rightly said, this is Dr. Saladin, the Chemical Engineering Department, head of the department. I've been with you for quite some time, and I appreciate a lot of your teaching, which I believe it will not only help the student. Even as I am here, I'm gaining a lot from the discussion. So I thank you, and I hope we'll be having this kind of opportunity from time to time. However, I would like to mention this. I think when Mrs. I forgot the name,
Ogbaide.
Ogbaide, yeah, when Mr. Ogbaide was discussing last time, he mentioned that we should be, I think the candidate have the opportunity to ask when whether it will be considered or not, or whether how did she put it? But precisely what I want to suggest is sometimes the interviewer might have said that well, it's only the candidate that are successful that will be contacted. So in that case, I don't think we need to raise any question whether we'll be contacted or not. I don't know whether you get my presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Something.
Yes. Okay. So I guess if that context has already been made, I mean, I- every organization has their own practice. But yeah. So if that has already been made, maybe you leave it be. But I
Mhm.
expect that I would expect. I feel that that is like a cop out professionally. I think that that is almost you not wanting to take the pin, and maybe because of the volume of applications or interviews that have you've managed. But don't leave people wondering is my own view around that.
Well,
Let people have closure. So if people have come and honored an interview, then the least you can do is to give them feedback. But of course, if they've told you already in the opening that you shouldn't expect to hear back if you were not successful, maybe what can be good is for them to say within this time frame. So we will aim to get back to all the successful candidates within 3 weeks. If after 3 weeks you haven't heard, then maybe you consider yourself not successful. I think it's a good way to manage people's expectations. And if maybe a recruiter tells you that we only contact what is it called? We only contact successful people. Maybe the
yeah.
one thing to do is to say, so if I don't hear from you by when, should then now consider that maybe I was not successful? I think would be a good way. But I think that that opportunity for closure is important to at least try and extract from the person.
Indeed. Okay. All right. So thanks. Okay. Go ahead, sir. All right. Okay. So I think thanks everyone. Someone has one last question that I think is very eager for us to tackle. So I'll just so it's not it's really not about interviews, but it's something I think is a career question, which being in HR, maybe you can also help them to guide them on what to do. So I hear so the question is that there's a common tradition for companies who use outsourcing companies to employ, and usually the career path is not clear. So the question here is, I think generally is what do you do with that kind of if you are in that kind of situation?
So you're being interviewed by a third party organization that doesn't have the career, cannot engage you on the career path.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yes, yes.
Hmm. Okay. So I think I would expect that if a third party is doing the recruitment for the organization, I would expect them to be knowledgeable about what people who are interviewing should be able to know. So in terms of the fine details or the granular details of your career path, they may not have it sufficiently, but at least they should have an overview of what you should expect. So they should actually be like representatives of the organization, like you're speaking to the organization themselves. In the event where you had a specific question that they could not answer, I would expect them to go back to the organization, if it is relevant at that stage of your interview, to go back to the interview, to the company, their clients, for the information and get back to you. It may be after the interview, especially if it's something that you are going to be using to gauge whether you accept an offer or not, or to even fully understand a little bit about the company that you're working. I'll expect them to be able to come back to you from that with that information if they did not have it. But just to manage your expectation, I think that the third party organization may not have the full details that you might want, but as a minimum, they should be able to give you an overview of, say, okay, so for an entry position or for their graduate development program, this is what you expect. Maybe you spend 3 years or 4 years in training. After 4 years in training, you should expect. So they should have a high level overview for you, but maybe not necessarily the details, because the details at the stage of the interview may not also be so critical. It might be nice to have for you, and of course, if they're benevolent enough to go back and get some details to send to you, then they will. Some of the information as well may be on the website of the company that you are asking, so they might refer you to that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank
Sorry,
you very much.
but
Yeah. Go ahead.
can I make a quick comment to that?
Yeah.
Thanks, Beverly. I guess I think I was looking at that question. The other bit that the person was asking is about job security. And the honest truth is that, well, I mean, to an extent, your company should provide you some extent of job security. I mean, they shouldn't just hire and fire, generally speaking. But sometimes life happens. Things happens in companies, and they let people go and things like that. So in that way, in absolute terms, your company cannot necessarily provide you job security for life, as it were. So if you think about job security, and again, relating it back to the question that was asked about outsourcing companies and all of that, I would say for you as a person, your job security should be down to you and what you do for yourself. So I'll give you an example. I started my career in Nigeria working in banking. I entered through the graduate role, but there were people. So I was employed directly by UBA then, but there were people who were employed by an outsourcing company that was used then, and they were usually people who were the tellers. And there was this particular guy who was employed that way, who was a teller, and his role was to count money. I mean, it wasn't like the most exciting job in the world. His job was just to count money. And for that, I mean, the honest truth is that there wasn't really a career path. The best you could go on to do is probably to become a teller who pay people money. So in that case, if you don't take your own destiny in your hands, then you probably continue to do that. But this guy decided that he wasn't just going to allow whether the outsourcing company or the company itself to determine his destiny. So what he did was he went beyond just counting money. So he started to make suggestions to the company, to suggest, come up with ideas of how to, make the company better and all of that. So that eventually his name got to the executives of the company, even though he was an outsourced staff. So you just have to find a way to make yourself outstanding. And eventually this guy went on to get some additional education for himself. And eventually he left that company for another company, got a more permanent role. And today he is in Sierra Leone as the chief operating officer of one of the branches of one of the Nigerian company's subsidiary in Sierra Leone. But he started about 2006, 2007. He started counting as someone who was counting money in the bank. So basically, my point is the company or the outsourced company may not give you job security, but it's up to you what to do with your career and how you want your career to go. And you need to make that decision the first day you get a job. Even if you get it through an outsourced company, how can you contribute beyond your job? People who are not, other people who are doing other things, go and ask them, what are they doing? What can you learn? How can you contribute? So don't just be passive with your career. You need to be active.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Tope. I think that's inside that. I probably missed the question.
Question.
So it's good that you sort of intervened and provided that content for a response. So thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. I think that's really, really a good point to close it up, right? That it's we have a saying in my own company that your career is in your hands, and I think people need to realize that um, there are a job is what it is. It is a job, right? But at the end of the day, your career belongs to you. Uh, it is about what you want to do, where you want to be, where you want to go to. So as you and everything that you see that you are going through, whether it's your time in school, this session, people you are going to meet, they all add up to develop you into who you should be. So you take advantage of those things to learn, take advantage of them to grow, such that when the opportunity, the company is no longer there, or is no longer able, or you grow bigger than the company, then you are able to make your way to something else that gives you still sparks your passion and gives you satisfaction. So I think that's the way to begin to look at it. We will all, no matter how beautiful the job is, you are going to outgrow it, and then one day you would want to get more. So, but the only thing that will make it give you the opportunity to go to somewhere else or to become something else is the developments, the skills, the capacities that you have pulled from your time within that organization. So I think that's maybe the key takeaway from me to you with respect to this question. Okay. All right. So thanks. I'd like to thank you all for spending the time with us. I do hope that this has been very helpful for you. Maybe like like Beverly has said, I see a lot of questions around. I want to see how a good CV looks like. Um, the best thing you can do is to just do a Google search and just do what does a good CV looks like, and you will see several samples there of different formats that you can look at and apply for yourself. So take a look at some of them and see which one may you would like to adopt. Maybe what I can promise is maybe I would also look through and send you maybe one or two samples that you can use as your own, as a template for you to build on. Okay. I wish you all the best and hope till the next time when we see. We promise that we'll bring you another session that will be just as exciting and as motivational as this. Thanks to our facilitators. Thanks, Tokwe, for joining, and thanks to Beverly for spending the time. I also thank the school administrators as well for giving us this opportunity. Do have a good day, and thank you for coming. Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks, Beverly.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Tope. Thank you, Babs. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.